Hi, welcome to the Baylor Line Foundation podcast. My name is Camille Cox, and I'm an intern with Baylor Line Foundation. And here I have Professor Robert Darden, Emeritus Professor of Journalism. He's joining us today to discuss what the Baylor Line means to both him and the Baylor family. So to start off, how long have you been a member / contributor of the Baylor Line?
My father's graduation present to me in 1976 was a lifetime membership to the Baylor Line.
Wow.
So I'm one of the original 30 lifetime members, 2 spots ahead of Grant Teff.
Oh, wow. Wow. And what has been one of your favorite contributing memories / moments that you've been able to do with the Baylor Line? Because you've written some incredible stories and got to investigate some really cool things and stories.
One of my favorites is one of my very first articles that I ever sold was to the Baylor Line. Way back about 1978, I wrote what I'd hoped was a humorous story about an alum coming back to a Baylor football game. And Sherry Casserole, then the editor, bought it, and it's continued a 50-year tradition of selling stories to the Baylor Line Foundation. And I don't mind selling because the worker is worthy of his wage, certainly. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the Baylor Line has always been an outlet for articles of weight that there isn't necessarily another outlet for. They were too heavy for the Baylor in-house publications. They were too Baylor-centric for Waco and Central Texas. So it has enabled me and other writers to really dig into things that what I hope were of a bigger value, and that we can draw bigger lessons from. And those kind of stories take more time, some of which months to do on top of your day jobs. And the older I get, the more I want to do stories like that matter. The department has had 2 of its graduates who have died as war correspondents. One, Wilson Fielder, in the early days of the Korean War, and then Sharon Herbaugh, who died during the many wars in Afghanistan in the 90s. And I actually was close to Sharon. And their lives and their accomplishments and their bravery and their willingness to run towards danger along with the other first responders when everybody else was running away has always inspired me, and I wanted to do justice to those lives. And the Baylor Line has afforded me the opportunity to do those kinds of stories. And I still identify as a writer who teaches. And I think it's been beneficial for my students, for them to know that what I'm teaching them, I am doing right now. And not just the books, but articles that they're likely to get a chance to do at some point, and the perils and the pleasures of doing meaty, thought-provoking stories that impact people's lives, and in my case, always impact mine as well. The story of the Baylor grad Al Doolin, whose son died in Vietnam, and the extraordinary essays and books that he wrote looking back on his son's death and how it changed he and his wife and other people because of the powerful words that he wrote, humbled me. I don't know that if I lost one of my kids or grandkids that I would be anywhere near as eloquent and convey the depth of pain and heartbreak in such a way that could bring peace to other Blue Star families. So I cherish the Baylor Line. It is a one-of-a-kind publication. I hope other alumni magazines are doing the same thing. In my experience, they're not. They would either be just slavishly parroting the university, which universities are all good. It's a good thing. But as the media marketplace changes here in 2023. There's so few places like this where this level of journalism is welcomed and promoted. So I will always be a sort of supporter of the Baylor Line magazine.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. You kind of touched on this, but what makes the Baylor Line special? There are a lot of different alumni organizations that alumni can get involved in.
Yeah.
Why the Baylor Line?
Historically, the Baylor Line magazine has been willing to not just do the tough stories, because Baylor, like everything else, isn't perfect. Nothing on this planet's perfect. I admire that Baylor continues to strive for the good. But there are stories that are not necessarily public relations stories that need to be told, because they're about the people who comprise the university. And it's both an outlet and sometimes a conscience for the university, and sometimes it's the sparrow and the canary in the mine shaft, the first one to sense when there is problems. And you have to have at least one voice in all of the voices you're hearing that's willing to tell you the truth. As we used to say in my old religious humor and satire magazine, The Wittenberg Door, somebody has to say the emperor is buck naked. And you don't always cherish or relish that role, and it's not always well received, and people are more likely to kill the messenger than they are to hear the message. That's why journalists typically don't live into their 90s, I'm sure. It would be a loss to Baylor University's heart should the Baylor Line someday go away in its present configuration, whether it's in print or online. As long as that word is out there and lives can be touched, it serves an important role that I'm not sure is replaceable by anything that's institutionally mandated.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this is just kind of a question personally I had. I think a lot of current students don't realize they get membership. Mm-hmm. So what would you say to current students? Why should they join? They get the emails from Baylor Larry. They can learn the news online. Why should they join the Baylor Line and become part of this network?
I don't know about you, Camille, but I was incredibly myopic in 1976. I only thought about what was the next thing. Was I going to grad school, or was I going to
That's where I'm at, yeah.
And that consumed that last 6 months, pretty much all of my available brain power, which by then wasn't a whole lot.
Yeah.
And probably not thinking beyond much that, but staying in touch with the university is a whole lot more than just hearing who had a baby and who's getting married and what new wonderful program they have. The university is made up of an extraordinary kaleidoscope of faculty and staff and students and administrators, and the adventures they go through, the stories they go through, the failures they go through, are just as important as the successes, just as important as the new programs. And you learn the life lessons here that come with not just the magazine, but being in a relationship with other alumni of multiple years. And yes, there's certainly networking opportunities, and yes, there's certainly chances for social. But a university is so much more than just the brick and mortar. It is not just a place to help you get a job. If it is, then it should have been a technical college, and God bless technical colleges. We need them. But if you came to Baylor only for the sole reason to get a job somewhere and never really go below that level, I think you've missed a significant part of the university experience. And there is no other organization that more celebrates the totality of the university experience than the Baylor alumni
organization.
Absolutely.
last kind of question I have, and if you don't have anything for this, it's totally okay. It's off the top of your head.
Have you ever known me?
Any personal anecdotes are really cool. I mean, you've interviewed such incredible people and written these really important stories.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any personal anecdotes that you'd like to share? I know there's a lot, but anything, any stories that just you really connected with the line and got to tell the story that you've always wanted to tell?
Nearly everything I've written for the line is I pitched it.
Yeah.
I wanted to tell that story, so that's kind of unfair. Occasionally they would make assignments, but yeah, some things I'd always heard. Former Baylor President Admiral McCall was in the FBI, but it wasn't until I started reading the oral histories and the official records finding out he was really in the FBI, gun carrying shootouts during the war. But the one I often think of, because he was one of my favorite professors at Baylor, and I interviewed him several years later, is Dr. O.T. Hayward. And he was head of geology. He was one of the more offbeat, charismatic, goofy professors I ever had. He was so good that in his intro class, he almost made me a geology major, and my brother Steve 3 years later.
Oh, wow.
And it's hard to say why he was so good. He certainly wasn't a preacher or a big charismatic speaker.
Mm-hmm.
He was. But one day, he and I cooked up the idea to do the story on the Brazos River itself.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a wonderful cartoonist of the old school, the 1930s, with those funny little line drawings of people off pages and funny faces. Nobody did it better. And we wanted to tell how Baylor was shaped by the Brazos, the geological reason why Baylor is Baylor, or is there. And by the end of it, turned out to be several interviews with him. Baylor at the time had completely ignored the Brazos. As had the city. It was just a dirty ditch. This is before the dam. It was a dump. And when the tornado tore down downtown, most of that was dumped over here by the river by Baylor, just because nobody cared. But Hayward helped me see that the two are inextricably intertwined and will be forever. And you need to acknowledge and cherish it in its all basic geologic forms. And he one day started talking about the different floods that have hit Baylor and downtown until we actually got a handle on what the river could be. And just sitting mesmerized as he talked about the muddy Brazos slowly shambling out of its banks and creeping towards downtown. And because of these geologic formations, it would never get further than Patton F. Hall, but it would lap up to the top of the steps. And that Admiral McCall would look out of his third floor window and see these dirty billows of water
just
flowing
going, yeah.
Just painting incredible word pictures for me. And that piece, I think, ended up on the cover with his cartoons of the geologic strata in the river cutting through it. You need to go back and check this out. And then that set off a series of stories. It got such a good response, and again, I'm not taking credit, but Hayward was a wonderful storyteller. The Indian trails that became I-35 are there for a reason. Why did the Native Americans go there? Why is all the roads from the cattle drives and stuff, why do they go where they go? Well, they shaped Baylor. Wouldn't have been a Waco without the crossing at the Brazos where the bridge is. Wouldn't have been an I-35 except for the Blackland Prairie comes together with, those kinds of geologic formations. And his stories about how the place impacted the people in the institution have forever changed how I look at stories. Our young writers do a great job on description of people, but I don't think we do as good a job as people say in Europe, students do, of understanding the importance of place and time. And I did a couple stories like that, where why is Baylor have all these dichotomies? It's poor and rich, it's west and south, it's Baptist, and on and on and on. It's because we are on the literal dividing line between the Great West this way and the southern piney forest and Blackland Prairie this way, and why Fort Worth and Dallas are so radically different, not just in how they look and what they did, but in the mindset, because that goes right between them.
Yeah.
And those stories meant a lot to me because they helped shape my own writing for years to come, and I always looked then for the things beyond just the superficial. Those stories would have never been published. Not even the Texas Monthly could have published those stories because they were so Baylor-centric. But when you think about it, nearly every school is shaped by not just the big rich donors and the pioneers, but by where they were and when and why. So I'll always be grateful for the line to give me the opportunity